Hey guys, it's Swordfish. So we're back for our second match in the Modern League. So if you want to see our first game where I explain the deck list also, you can check that out over there. But if not, I just also wanted to mention that you guys suggested that because my gameplay isn't live, I'm going to start treating the gameplay as if it's not live, and we'll see how that works out, and I think I'm going to do this in the future. So now that that's out of the way, let's get straight into the video. Okay, so this game we won the die roll, and this opening hand I thought it was pretty risky because we only have one land and an Ether Vial and we're on the play, but I figured we had Force Negation and Subtlety as free interaction to protect Ether Vial from maybe Prismatic Ending or any threat, so I thought I could probably get away with keeping this hand even though we are on the play and we have a reduced chance of drawing a land if we were on the draw. So that turn our opponent played Hall of the Storm Giants, and that typically means it's going to be control because they revealed Kahira as their companion, and now they played Hall of the Storm Giants, so we know we're at least playing against a slower deck, and this is most likely control. So this turn we drew our island, and I decided to pass the turn and hold up, and I was going to hold up Trickster. And we were also fortunate to draw our land that turn. So they play Mystic Gate and pass. Right? And I was contemplating if I wanted to play Merfolk Trickster on their end step or not, because it really did look like they have Counterspell. And I opted not to just because we can Ether Vial into play creatures, and I'm in no hurry in this matchup. So our opponent is going to tap our Ether Vial with Ice, and that's fine. This also means they can't hold up Counterspell anymore, so I can play out Master the Pearl Trident and just know that's going to resolve, most likely at least. So our opponent let the Master the Pearl Trident resolve, and I passed the turn. So on turn 3, our opponent could very well have Teferi Time Raveler, but they actually play Archmage's turn to gain control of Ether Vial. Now this was pretty big because Ether Vial is a way for us to get uncounterability, and we didn't even get to take advantage off of it yet, and I decided I wanted to force negate this, but I didn't really know what to pitch. I was between Merfolk Trickster and Master of the Pearl Trident, and still, both would have been fairly fine options. Merfolk Trickster is definitely more for the tempo play, but I didn't know which one was better. Master of the Pearl Trident would help swing in for more damage, and it was a pretty hard decision. So I forget what I did. Let's see what I did. Honestly. Okay, so I pitched Master of the Pearl Trident. I could see leaving Master of the Pearl Trident just in case you really wanted to push in for more damage, but I like taking a longer approach versus control, so I do expect that I probably pitched Master. So I attacked with Master of the Pearl Trident, and I also ticked up Ether Vial. That way I can Vial in Swayloon, because there's no guarantee I'll be able to cast her. And we drew Vodalian Hexcatcher that turn, so we'll have good flash speed interaction. So on their end step, even though they could very well have interaction, I figured we need to apply some pressure, and I can still Vial in a Swayloon, and they decided to let the Merfolk Trickster resolve. So then I said, okay, let's just Vial into play Swayloon and see what happens. And I'm pretty sure our opponent just still passed, yeah. So I was contemplating what our opponent could have. I was thinking maybe they have the Wandering Emperor. They only have 4 lands open, so they can't hard cast Solitude. We also drew Merfolk Trickster that turn, and I ticked up Ether Vial up to 4 because we already worked it up to a Swayloon. We might as well work it up to Subtlety. So I just attack with everything, and if they do have something like the Wandering Emperor or even a Solitude, I can use Subtlety. So they actually cycle a Shark Typhoon token, and that wasn't what I was expecting, but that's fine because they did this before blocks, and then I can Merfolk Trickster tap down the token so they can't block with it. I decided to just draw a card first to make sure that there's no better option, so then I play out Merfolk Trickster to basically prevent a trade with Master of the Pearl Trident. And then we swing for a sizable amount of damage that turn. Let's see. Yeah, we brought our opponent down to 9. And considering they were at 18, that's a 9-point swing. That's pretty good. And next turn, I believe we would have had lethal, right? That's 6 and 4. Yeah, that's lethal. We also still can Vial into play a Subtlety. Now, I could have filed into play a subtlety here to get no value and just block the token, but I realized I'm at 17 life. I'd rather just take the 2 damage. And remember, if our opponent plays a card like Supreme Verge, we still get to keep the Swaylun afterwards because she has Indestructible. So since Supreme Verge is a pretty big threat in this matchup. So our opponent does go for the Supreme Verdict, and that's fine. And it also makes me grateful I didn't vial into play a subtlety for no value, because then it would have just died. So now that it's on our end step, I said, you know what? I kind of want to continue swinging in for damage, so let's just vial in a subtlety, no value, now that we know the coast is pretty much clear. Well, they still have 5 cards in hand, but it's getting better. So we draw another land that isn't actually that great, but we still have Vodalian Hexcatcher for interaction. And before you play out anything, see what you draw off of Swaylun, because she's just such an engine. So we bring our opponent down to 3, which means a single hit from subtlety is lethal, which is really good. So on our end step, our opponent just cracks their fetch land, and let's see what they did here. So I was kind of confused when they just passed the turn, so I thought I'd just keep Vodalian Hexcatcher in hand as a surprise, even though they do have a lot of mana open. So we draw Tideshaper, and Tideshaper is really ideally a turn 1 play versus the control deck because it can start getting in aggressive really quickly. So this turn I was really curious what our opponent had, because yeah, they have 6 mana open now. So I was thinking, is it just safer for me to... I checked the Hall of the Storm Giants, it needs 6 lands to activate, and they only had 5 to pay for it. So I was thinking, how are you going to survive this turn? So I just figured, let's attack with everything. I can work things. So I thought, let's see what my opponent has, get information. The next, on my second main, I can do some things. So we draw another Swaylun. So it's always good to have a backup, honestly, since Swaylun can die to Supreme Verdict, it can get bounced. So they hard cast a Solitude, so now we know how they plan on surviving. So they would typically, in most cases, exile Swaylun, but they're in a dire situation, so they exiled the Subtlety, and in order to gain life, they had to block the Swaylun. And, I mean, if they don't block, they lose, so... And this is a pretty good exchange for us, honestly. They get to survive a little longer, but that's okay. And then I decided to play out an island and run Tideshaper out. And you might as well kick it, because the only thing we're going to be playing otherwise is Vodalian Hexcatcher, and that only requires 2 mana. Could we have saved 1 life by not using a Waterlogged Grove? Yes, but I don't think it's worth it. Cutting them off of red is more important, honestly. And I still leave Vodalian Hexcatcher in hand since it can be useful. They can play Supreme Verdict out, and then I can play Vodalian Hexcatcher to grant Swaylun Indestructible. I like using it as a surprise play. So they hardcast another Solitude, and there was really not too much I believe I could have done. I decided to draw with my Waterlogged Grove, just see if I drew an answer, but it was a forced negation. So they can exile Swaylun, Indestructibility doesn't matter. We just let that resolve. We draw another Celtic. That's a little too late, honestly, but that was okay. So we can play out another Swaylun here, and then... yeah, I think, and remember, Aether Vial is on 4. We can vial into play that Subtlety. Yeah, so I decided to run out the Swaylun, and we can still protect her with Subtlety as interaction. Oh, now I'm having I had second choices. Holding up Vodalian Hexcatcher is good, and then you also, by holding up Vodalian Hexcatcher, you get to hold up Force Negation. So there were some pretty good lines here, honestly. I could see wanting the Force Negation, but I think in the end, the right play is to go Swaylun, and then have the Subtlety. But maybe holding a Force Negation is useful. Besides, actually we can vial in Subtlety on their end step if they do nothing, have Force Negation as backup, so I think maybe I actually made the right play here. So, our opponent had Counterspell probably, so I was thinking, I really want to deal with this thing, because having flash interaction is really important, so let's force negate that and see what they do about it. And when they play the counterspell, that's fine, because we can still Violence play the Subtlety, and this also means they only have 1 blue mana open. I probably should have just Violed in the Subtlety to begin with, but yeah, I think this Violating Subtlety to begin with was fine, but I think I'm pretty happy with this interaction. We've used a counterspell to basically just... They used a counterspell for that, so I'm okay with that exchange, honestly, but I think Violating Subtlety could have been a nicer play. So our opponent gets in the red zone just to guarantee some life gain, but we're winning this race in the end because they're at 8, and then I can play Vodalian Hexcatcher out, and then I can swing for 7 damage? I think that's right. So now we have the mana for Vodalian Hexcatcher and Suiloon, so we can attack with these creatures, which would send our opponent down to 5, right? No. They would take 5, then they would go down to 3. And then we could play Vodalian Hexcatcher if we need to. And remember, when we play Vodalian Hexcatcher, we give Suiloon indestructible. So if they play Supreme Verdict right now, what we would do is play Vodalian Hexcatcher, give Suiloon indestructible, and then swing for 3 to close out the game. So they played Kahira, and that is fine, honestly. They're attacking with their Solitude. And I decide, okay, well, Suiloon's, you tapped out, so I'm not concerned about what you have anymore. And then what I can do before damage is just play Vodalian Hexcatcher. And what will happen then is Suiloon have indestructible, and we're just killing your Solitude. And now we have a really good board, and they concede. They knew it was game. Alright, well, that was fun. And I hope you enjoyed my more truthful commentary on this. And let's talk about sideboarding. So for sideboarding, I decided to add the extra subtlety in our sideboard, since it's a 4-mana 3/3 with flying, which is good, and then we can also get extra value off of it, so I figured it was a good card to bring in for this matchup. I added in 2 Spell Pierces, since it's an efficient way to deal with our opponent's threats, like the Fairy Time Raveler, or other counter magic, or other planeswalkers. It's just pretty good all around in this matchup. I also added in a Brazen Borrower, since it's going to be good at bouncing Shark Typhoon tokens or other threats temporarily, while offering a 3/1 body in the air. I decided to cut Spreading Seas, since yes, you can deal with their creature lands, but by the point where the creature lands become relevant, I think it's already too late to win. I cut 1 Force Negation, since we had added 2 Spell Pierces, we're still technically up on counter magic, and then I trimmed 1 Lord of Atlantis, since I didn't know what else to cut, and we have 4 Vodalian Hexcatchers, so I was pretty sure we would have enough Lords in the deck. And with that said, let's get into game 2. So we're on the draw this game, and our opening hand, this one was just a no-lander, we can't keep it, even on the draw. Now this hand was much more keepable, and I decided, yeah, I could keep this. And I decided that we had 4 lands, so I figured I could just bottom one of those out of the 4, and I decided to bottom the island. And our opponent, I believe they just played a fetch land and passed here, yeah, they played Floodstrand. And then, what's nice here is, I'm not going to kick the Tide Shaper, I'm just going to run it as a 1-drop, since it's great as a 1-drop versus this deck in particular, because it's an aggressive start. It's a 1-mana 2/2, and versus control, it's pretty good, honestly. And then, if we want, we can play out a Lord, which means it's a 3/3, definitely a pretty aggressive start for Merfolk, at least. So our opponent passes the turn with 2 blue mana open. This basically just means they have Counterspell, most likely, and I decided to play out Fiery Islet. That way I could play Vodalian Hexcatcher on their end step, and I also attacked with Tide Shaper, of course, but I realized I probably should have played out the Mutavault. That way I didn't pay the extra life, since it wasn't relevant. I didn't need double blue, yet I did that anyway, and I think it was a misplay. So our opponent plays Prismatic Ending. For 1, it's not really worth force negating that, especially considering the options we would have to pitch for that. Force negation is much better versus their planeswalkers and other types of threats. So on their end step, I played out Vodalian Hexcatcher. Now, does it look like they have Counterspell? Absolutely. But I have Suiloon in hand. If they counterspell this, my Suiloon is going to resolve. So in some ways, I'm actually hoping they counterspell this just so my Suiloon is free to resolve, since Suiloon, in my opinion, is going to be more impactful, but Vodalian Hexcatcher, I would love to see its power versus control. So I decided to run out Suiloon now. They decided to counterspell it, so The coast is clear. And we drew another Lure of Atlantis that turn, so that's not bad. They decided to play out Hollow Fountain and Shocked, and then they played Memory Deluge. I didn't know if I wanted to force to negate this or not. Considering they only have 3 cards in hand, they are getting some good value, but I figured if they get a threat off of it, I can then force to negate the threat, or it could just be kind of weak. I decided to let it resolve, yet I think it... I don't regret letting it resolve, but I don't know how much would have changed if I actually countered it. Because I did tap out for this effect, but I had a Swayloon out, I could deal with more things. We drew a Trickster, which is good, and which also means we can give Swayloon Indestructible out of nowhere. See, if they play something like Supreme Verdict, we could play Merfolk Trickster before the Supreme Verdict resolves, and then make Mutable a tapped creature if we really wanted to keep our Swayloon out. So I decided to just hold up Merfolk Trickster and pass the turn. What's nice about this is we get to hold up Force Negation, so just in case we don't feel like pitching. So on their end step, it was time to run out Merfolk Trickster. I didn't know exactly what they had, so I just went for it. And then they played Dress Down, which was really interesting because, well, they don't have any creatures, so Merfolk Trickster doesn't even have any targets, but that means that Swayloon will not have a draw trigger. So, pretty interesting play, honestly, right now, but I was okay with that. So then they played Archmage's Charm as a counterspell, and I don't really like force negating Archmage's Charm as counterspells, since I find it I don't think it's worth it to force to negate an Archmage's Charm as a counterspell. I like it more when they choose to draw 2, or when they choose to gain control, something like Ether Vial or Tide Shaper. So I decided to play out Silvergill Adept, and we're missing our land drop this turn, and we drew a Subtlety, so it'd be really nice if we drew a land here. But I forgot that our opponent had Dress Down, honestly. Anyway, yeah, I forgot about Dress Down. So, Teferi Time Raveler, that is a pretty big deal. And even though they had, I was thinking about force negating it, but then I realized that it looks like they have counterspell, and I really don't want to pitch cards in order to just deal with I don't want to pitch a blue card to my force negation for them to just counter the force negation and still have Teferi resolve, and I figured it would be okay if I just let this resolve. So I decided to bounce Swayloon and draw, so that was fine, and I assumed next turn I would be able to kill the Teferi. So we draw another Subtlety, so what's annoying is I didn't get another land drop, but the Subtleties and Force Negations are useless right now because of Teferi's static ability. So I swing at Teferi. And then our opponent thinks for a very long time about it. Yeah, but right now we have no interaction up, so they decide to fire it. Okay. Well, that was fine. I mean, we can't do anything about it. And I just decided to run Swayloon out again. And I don't know if I should have fought over the Teferi with the Force Negation. I still don't think it was worth it walking into an obvious counterspell, so I'm pretty happy with my play there, honestly. They just ticked up the Teferi and passed the turn, so they could literally have anything right now, and I figured I'll just attack with Swayloon. We still can't hard cast a Subtleties, which is pretty annoying. Draw trigger on the stack, they decide to cycle a Shark Typhoon, and even if Teferi wasn't there, we still couldn't do anything about it. And we draw off, and it was a Trickster. That'd be nice if we could cast it before blockers, but can't do that. So we lose our Swayloon, and then second main, I forget what I did here, so let's see. I mean, I would have, honestly, if Teferi wasn't here, it would be an obvious move to pass, because you could hold up Force Negation, hold up Merfolk Trickster, hold up Vodalian Hexcatcher, but because we're working at sorcery speed, I just decided to play out Lore of Atlantis, and it seems fine. So I really want to get that Teferi off the board because of how much flash interaction we have, so it's best if I run... So here, it would be best for me to run out another Island Walk Lord and just try to attack the Teferi because we'll have Island Walk and hope that that works out. So it resolves, and with how much open mana they have, it's really risky that they just let the Lore of Atlantis resolve. So I decided not to do anything because, realistically speaking, they could have a removal spell, a bounce spell, literally anything. And they had 4 cards left in hand, so they could have had a Solitude, Exiled. It would be a lot of value, and I figured it was just safer not to attack, even though I don't like doing it. See, they had the Prismatic Ending, which means I would have lost my Lore of Atlantis in that exchange, so... It is annoying to see the Teferi take up like this, though, with how much interact. We have 5 cards in hand right now that have Flash. So right now, we still are at 3 lands, which is really annoying. So I play out Silvergill Adept and hope to draw another land. I mean, it's turn 9 right now, and we're still at 3 lands. We're dealing with the 3 lands we had in our opening hand. That's actually wild. So then they counterspelled it. And now we're falling behind because, well, we can't really attack Teferi. Our opponent has 4 cards left in hand. They hardcast a Solitude. We can't subtlety it. We're falling pretty far behind. But I decided to just stay in this game for a little longer. They go up to 10, we're down to 7, they bounce, and then we draw a Master, we needed a land. The game just didn't work out, and our opponent is basically going to kill us next turn since they're going to play Solitude on our end step, and yeah, not the best game for us. With that said, let's get in straight into Game 3. Alright, so this time we'll be on the play, and let's wait to see what our opening hand looked like. So this opening hand, it looks pretty fine. We have Tideshaper to run out on turn 1. It's a great 1-drop because it's a 1-mana 2/2, and having an aggro strategy in the early game versus control is great. On turn 2, we can play Vodalian Hexcatcher just as an extra Lord with Flash, which is always good, and our opponent just decides to play a fetch lands and pass the turn. So this means that Tideshaper is only going to swing in for 1, but that's fine. We draw a Brazen Borrower, and here I think I should have played out the Mutavault since we're just going to pass anyway, and everything we're going to hold up has a generic mana and its casting cost, so I think that was a misplay, but it didn't matter in the end. So we swung for 1 damage, then they sacrificed their fetch land on their end step, and now our Tideshaper is a 2/2 creature. So they just play a castle and pass. Now, I've decided to run out Vodalian Hexcatcher, even though it does look like they have a counterspell. Remember, that guarantees we can get our lords to resolve, or we can petty theft something if they have a threat, which isn't likely. But I'm okay with these early game 1-for-1 interactions, but depending on the cards you play, you might not want to get counterspelled. So they actually just had March of the Otherworldly Light instead, which was fine. Now we drew a Larwalk Grove that turn, so I decided to run out Master the Pearl Trident to swing for some more damage. And this turn, I just attacked with the Vodalian Hexcatcher. I played Master the Pearl Trident because I wanted to have a means of just getting some damage through, since we have a pretty Lord-heavy hand. But this turn, they decided to play Prismatic Ending, killing off our Vodalian Hexcatcher, so we have less Lords. I draw an Odawara. I decided to play out the Waterlogged Grove first since Odawara can offer more utility, and if I feel like sacrificing the Waterlogged I can, but I decided to activate Mutavault. I made sure I didn't play it that turn, but I decided to activate the Mutavault and attack with it because even though having Petty Theft is nice, being able to swing in for an extra 4 damage is very relevant, and I figured it would be a good play. But actually, unfortunately, they had a March of the Otherworldly Light to kill off the Mutavault, so it would have been nice if I decided to go for the hold up Petty Theft route, but I don't think what I did was a misplay. So I passed the turn to my opponent, and let's see this. So they played an island, and then they played Memory Deluge. Nothing we can do about it, it resolves. So then they cast a Solitude. For its evoke, they exiled Fairy Time Raveler, and they decided to exile the untapped Lord of Atlantis. And then they pass through. So we draw a Subtlety, which just gives us incentive to play out Odawara as a land. That way we can play Subtlety if we have to. And now basically we're operating at flash speed, so right now just swing in for 2 and hold up the Brazen Borrower and the Subtlety. Our opponent's down to 11 life, which is not bad, but it is turn 5, so they had some pretty good answers, which is why they have a higher life total. So I decided just to run out Brazen Borrower since I didn't see them. And since I didn't have any threats and I really wanted to put a clock on my opponent, the Silvergill Adept, not a good draw since we have no Merfolk to reveal with it, and we don't even have the opportunity to pay 5 mana for the alternative casting cost. They decide to fetch out an island. Now, I was concerned they would have Solitude, and that's why it's nice to have Subtlety, but they actually had Shark Typhoon, which means they could block and kill Master of the Pearl Trident. So, what's really interesting is what I could have done is sacrifice the Waterlogged Grove to hope to draw Merfolk Trickster and see if that could have tapped the Shark Typhoon, but it's not worth it because we get to hold up Subtlety right now. But depending board states and how things are going, you could make that move. It just really depends on how you're doing. And they decided to not attack and just pass through, and I decided, well, they have a 3/3 shark token right now. How about we just cast Subtlety? And it also now seems unlikely they have Supreme Verdict just because they played Prismatic Ending and Marches to deal with early threats, and they would have just let all that resolve and happen. So they decided to counterspell the Subtlety, so that's fine. We draw another Silvergill Adept, which means we can reveal a Silvergill Adept to the Silvergill Adept, and we drew an island, which means we can't cast the other Silvergill Adept. So they have the shark token. I decided, let's just not attack. I don't know if I should have been more aggressive and attacked with the Brazen Borrower and tried to make a trade happen, but right now it didn't seem too bad, so they just passed through, which is suspicious, and I said, you know what, let's sacrifice Waterlogged Grove, it's getting later game. So we draw Subtlety, which is good to have. We draw another island, still can't reveal a card to that Silvergill Adept, but we could hard cast it for 5 mana if we were desperate right now. I decided that, you know, I have the Subtlety now, maybe this in exchange isn't that bad, so I said, if I can trade these two and then start willingly attack you, it would be fine. So they decided to sacrifice their Flooded Strand on my end step, and that's fine. And then they flashed back from Memory Deluge, and nothing we can do about it. It resolves. They get some really nice card selection off of that, though. Yeah, this is definitely a harder decision for our opponent. But also note, I don't have too much time left on my clock, so any little subtle errors I might make is actually because I realized I spent way too much time earlier in the game, and I was kind of rushing through. And, yeah, so my decisions, I still tried to keep them well made, but in the end, I didn't really sit down and properly evaluate everything. I tried my best to play well, but I really need to win quickly because I have 6 minutes left on the clock, and I just wanted to do this. Like, see, I tapped the extra land because I was rushing at this point, but then it undid that, of course. But okay, we draw an Ether Vial, can't cast a Silver Gill Adept unless I pay 5. So this is really suspicious how our opponent's just passing the turn and they're at 6 life. So I just decided to attack with everything and see what they have. Okay, I decided to just attack with a Subtlety, because if they have a Solitude, they'll exile the Subtlety, and then I was playing around Solitude because they'll exile Subtlety, but I won't lose Silver Gill Adept if they decide to block, but then they just had a really big Shark Typhoon, so that didn't work out well. And I realized there's nothing I can do, so I'll just play out a 5-mana Silver Gill Adept. Not where you want to be, but it was fine. So we draw our 3rd Subtlety this game, and for all of them, I believe we just got no value, so our opponent plays Hollow of the Storm Giants. And they decide, I'm still at 6 life, this is getting risky. So it would be really nice now if we just had an extra land out, that way we could cast Subtlety and also cast Vodalian Hexcatcher. So I was contemplating whether I just attack with both these well, right now, I decided to attack with these, and if they blocked one, I could cast a Vodalian Hexcatcher and send my point down to 3, and right now, I really just can't play around counterspells. I just gotta hope these things resolve, honestly, because our opponent has much better card advantage than us, and even though they are now down to, they're about to be at 3 life, he's pretty well to do right now, actually. When you get to make it to turn 10 versus control, you gotta just hope you have a decent amount of gas, and if you don't, then you might just lose from value, even if you get your opponent down to a really low life total. So our opponent was thinking for a while over here, but they decided to let it happen, and we bring our opponent down to 3. So if we can draw an Island Walk Lord next turn, then we can win, assuming they have nothing. What's unfortunate here is we don't get to hold up Subtlety, and that's a pretty good card we can't even pitch. So then they cast a Solitude, which is really annoying, since they can start attacking with it to gain life if they're desperate. But we only gain 1 life from this, and that's kind of annoying. So they have a 5/5 and a 3/2, which means they actually have a pretty good clock now. Like, not a good clock, but fairly decent. They attack with the Solitude just to guarantee some life gain if I top deck a Lord. Yet they still keep the Shark token on defense, and then they brought their companion into hand, and they played a Relic of Progenitus. I don't know why they didn't side that out, but it's irrelevant versus our deck. We top decked an island, that's not really that good, no reason to attack. So right now, we kind of need some lucky top decks in order to come back from this. They cycle Relic because it was pretty useless. They played Teferi Time Raveler. I said, let's get value from one of our subtleties. And even though it does look like this is a counterspell, there's nothing much we can do here, really. They played Dress Down, so that was really interesting, which means subtlety will do nothing, but it'll at least resolve. And then their Teferi resolve. So Teferi is pretty annoying. I just wanted to see how many subtleties we drew, since it feels like I had a million. What's good about subtlety is it's in the air, but they have a shark token in the air, so it doesn't really matter. They prismatic ending away a Silver Gill Adept, and they have 6 cards in hand right now. So we're also below 5 minutes left on the clock. I was contemplating blocking this or not, because yeah, this is giving them a really good outlet to just gain tons of life, and we draw another subtlety. I really can't complain. And remember, we can't play Subtlety at flash speed because of Teferi Time Raveler. So Subtlety is literally just a 4-mana 3/3 right now. And they decided to sacrifice Flooded Strand. And also just remember, I'm actually getting pretty stressed right now because our opponent's looking pretty good and we're really late in the game. I only have 4 minutes left on the clock. So they play Steam Vents tapped, and they still decide not to attack because it's a little too early for them to do that. Decide to play out Ether Vial. I'm empty-handed, there's nothing I can do. If I draw a Silver Gill Adept, it's going to be relevant to have the Ether Vial out. They draw 2 with Archmage's Charm, that resolves. So right now they just have a lot of card advantage, and we really can't attack into them. They draw 2 again with Archmage's Charm. Then they tap down the Subtlety. So, yeah. They uptick Teferi. I know you can't see the loyalty on Teferi. Sorry about that. Then they hardcast Solitude. So right now, there's really no coming back from this. And then when they play, their companion, of course. They attack with the Shark token. I get down to 17 life. And we still only have 3 minutes left on the clock. I mean, how am I going to lose? Am I going to lose from life loss or time? So I got to run out Swayloon quickly. And I really didn't think this was enough to come back from. They tap down Swayloon. Next turn, they have a pretty good board. They have 8 cards in hand right now. Ugh. They activate Hall of the Storm Giants, attacked with everything, and yeah, that was game. So, yeah, that was just a game of like things slipping out. They had enough interaction, and it just didn't work out for us in the end. So far, we're 1-1 in our Modern League, and I hope to see you for the next gameplay video. Bye!